The article I chose for this presentation is called One Kid at a Time. It was written by Carolyn Tomlinson. Carolyn Tomlinson is a woman who was at the forefront of the differentiated instruction movement. She began her public work in the late 80s and 90s. She was a teacher and did some amazing work with students without much basis. She kind of created it within herself to individualize the students' education. Differentiated instruction, for those of you who don't know, it's a manner of teaching where you focus on the individual students, not on the individual students' talents and their likes and what their wants are, instead of as one whole class. So when you go into a class, you may have one objective, but you're going to have maybe 3 or 4 or possibly 10 different lessons, mini lessons that you're going to teach within that to hit all the points in the classroom, rather than one whole lesson to encompass the entire class. Differentiated instruction is more of a philosophy rather than something that you do, though it is something extra that you do, and it does take time, especially at first. But it has to be your philosophy. You have to walk into the school every day and say, okay, how can I help this child? What does he need? What are we going to do for him today? And you need to constantly assess the children, where they're at, what they're doing, so you can switch it up as you go. And if you're in the middle of a lesson and it's not going well with certain students, then you change it, and you have to have those parts of the lesson ready and available for you to give to them. This particular article, it's not a how-to article. It's not a research article. It's more an article about her successes in implementing differentiated instruction inside of her classroom. My hope is to talk about the article and connect the article to what we as supervisors or administrators are going to need to implement it properly. But before you are able to implement it properly, you need to know what you're implementing and how to use it. And then also you need to know how to structure and how to scaffold the teachers so the teachers can scaffold the students. The article has 3 vignettes that I will get to. First, the article begins with a quote by Bill Moyers, who was a commentator for PBS. And his quote was, "I used to have 4 theories about raising children. Now I have 4 children and I have no theories." And she likens this to how teachers kind of go into the classroom. You go into a classroom and in school you did all this research and you have all this great knowledge and all these great ideas that you can do, and you get into the classroom and you hit a brick wall because now the theory and this research doesn't match up with this class. There's no one-size-fits-all answer, and you have to start trying different things, and it's a failure at first, which is why a lot of teachers get frustrated at first. You don't know what you're doing, and it takes a lot of work to differentiate in the classroom. And you focus on each child, and you do it slowly, and then you work your way up to 2 or 3 or 4 children. She says that though theory and research are great, and we definitely need to be grounded in theory and research, we also need to be grounded in heuristics, meaning we have to be able to focus on what the child needs and how they're going to come up with their own conclusions, and then how those conclusions are going to be meaningful for them. The first anecdote that she talks about is about a 13-year-old boy who didn't do any work in class except draw cartoons. And so finally she kind of got tired of it, and she said, all right, fine, if you want to draw cartoons, you can, but you have to be able to mesh what I'm teaching into your cartoons. And he agreed to that. So what they did was, like with language arts, if they were writing a letter, if they were doing letter writing, so instead of him writing some generic letter, he wrote a letter to the principal asking him to use the copier to make photocopies of his comics, and he wrote letters to the community asking them for donations so they can give him money so he can buy the stuff that he needs for the comics because the school wouldn't supply it. And inside of those comics, he would intertwine what they were learning. If there was a math lesson or a science lesson, social studies lesson, he would make a comic about that. And by the end of the year, he covered all the points of the curriculum, just not the exact way that everybody else did. But he learned everything that he needed to learn. And now he's a professional cartoonist. The second anecdote was about a 15-year-old boy who was in the 7th grade class and who didn't really talk. He whispered, And finally, she went up to him early on in the school year, and he said that he couldn't read at all. And she had no idea how to teach reading, let alone how to teach reading to a 15-year-old boy in a 7th grade class. So she came up with the idea of having him come up to her desk, and he would tell her stories, and they would work on vocabulary and spelling from those stories, and he would learn how to spell. They would pick up certain vocabulary words, certain spelling words that he would have to use during the week, until eventually he was able to read a little better, and then she got him to read comics. And the reason that she gave him the comics was because the pictures help the context of the writing. He's able to see it more in context than just flat-out writing, and it makes more sense to him. And she said as far as he was concerned, as far as the curriculum, it was a complete failure. He didn't reach any objective that was supposed to be met for that year. However, she did say that he grew the most out of anybody that she's ever had. So is it a failure or is it a success? It's a success because he did phenomenal considering where he came from. And she had to completely go off the rails to do something special for this kid so he can learn. And then the last one was about an 8th grade boy who came up to her right away and said, "Hey, I want to learn about dinosaurs." And she was very reluctant at first, but she spoke to him about it, and she actually asked him, she said, "Well, what are your ideas about it?" And he said, "Well, I could come to you every Monday. You could give me the objectives for the week, and I could work on those objectives at my own pace through utilizing dinosaurs." And she agreed to it, kind of reluctantly, not really knowing where it was going, but she allowed him to do it. And through the year, weekly, she would check up on him and see how the work was going. And, she saw what he was doing, and he was actually doing what he was supposed to be doing and meeting the objectives. So she allowed him to continue doing it. And at the end of the year, he presented an entire lesson on dinosaurs, intertwining all the objectives that they learned throughout the year. And they went home, and that was the end of the school year, and he never came back for his grade. And her thought was he didn't need to come back for the grade. One, he knew that he did well, and the reward itself was he wanted to learn about dinosaurs. So intrinsically, it was a reward. He didn't need a grade. He didn't need anything special for that. He got what he wanted through differentiated instruction. Now, the article itself has very little to do with administration and supervision. It's all about just personal stories of teaching and how she did it and was successful at it. As far as us as administrators, in this day and age with No Child Left Behind and these high-stakes testing, we need to be able to reach much more of the population in our school. And what used to work 10, 20 years ago doesn't work like that today. So we need to learn how to differentiate in our classroom, and we need to create an open climate in our classroom and in our school to create trust among the teachers and the faculty, and trust among the faculty and the students. And I believe a lot of that climate is the basis for differentiation. The teachers need to be allowed to make their own decisions in that classroom concerning that curriculum. For it to be fulfilled to its greatest extent, the school needs to be structured in the Mitzenberg configuration of professional bureaucracy, coupled with the Hoy-Tater model. And both of these models work perfectly, a perfect breeding ground for differentiated instruction. They give the teachers the latitude to do the work that they need to do, as long as they keep that open communication with the supervisors and keep it up to, as long as they meet the standards and objectives that they need to be meeting. They need to communicate their contingent plans with them. They need to have their work ready, just like any